My name is Wilford Felix, and I'm born and raised in Belize City. The thing is, culture is not something you learn along the way. Culture is part of your very upbringing. It's encoded in your DNA, and in your journey or in your life, you bring your culture to life, so to speak, or you bring it up out of you and live what is already encoded. As a poet, as a writer, I came to a point where I did not want to write like everybody else. For example, in the spoken word field, there's an American style that our Belizean writers like to use. And my contemplation was, I'm not American, so I should not have an American style. I'm not Jamaican either, so I should not have a Jamaican style. I then began creating my own style that I call the Belizean sonnet. And it took me some time to craft it exactly the way that I wanted, in terms of it having a specific meter, a specific structure that I can now teach anyone to write in that style. The Belizean sonnet, it has three basic forms: the standard Belizean sonnet, the short sonnet, and the long sonnet. It has two subforms. The first subform is a subform of the short sonnet, which I call the taciturn sonnet, because the short sonnet is already a condensed version of the Belizean sonnet, and the taciturn sonnet is a condensed version of the short sonnet. And then there is the repetition sonnet. So, to explain the evolution of the style, the Belizean sonnet is called a sonnet because of the structure of conventional sonnets, where a sonnet has three quatrains. A quatrain is a verse of 4 lines, and then a couplet. So the last verse in a traditional sonnet, or the conventional sonnet, has 2 lines. So that's a total of 14 lines. My sonnet, the Belizean sonnet, is 4 full quatrains, so a total of 16 lines. In, for example, the Shakespearean sonnet, it has the meter of it is called an iambic pentameter. The Belizean sonnet is an iambic tetrameter. That's because per line is an average of 10 words. For the Belizean sonnet, you can, depending on the length of the word and how it flows, you can use anywhere between 6 up to the maximum of 10 words per line. That's for the standard Belizean sonnet. The short sonnet, which is a condensed version of the Belizean sonnet, uses between 5 to 8 words per line. Then the taciturn sonnet, which is a more condensed version, uses between 1 and 6 words per line. Then the repetition sonnet, as it is called, the style of that is that there is either one line or a phrase that is repeated in the entire poem. So maybe you create like a punch line, and that is the last line for each quatrain, and you repeat that throughout the poem. And then the long sonnet, instead of being 16 lines, that one is a maximum of 16 quatrains. So that would give 64 lines. There's also when I first created the long sonnet, I actually called it the rant sonnet. So it accommodates up between 12 and 16 quatrains, and that formulates a long sonnet. So as creatives, we need to find a way to inspire nationalism among our people. In any society where the artistic contribution is suppressed, that is a society that is close to a decline. Because it is the artistic members of society that through their expression of their art, whether it's visual art, whether it's drama, dancing, poetry, singing or music, playing an instrument, it is the artistic community that inspires creativity in the entire nation. So the Belizean sonnet is my contribution to the Belizean identity, to give us something in terms of performance and arts and the literary field that we could claim entirely as our own, that we could look at not as something that we're mimicking from another culture or that we're borrowing from another culture, but an entirely Belizean invention. Borrowing from other cultures or from other creatives in other parts of the world is not a bad thing, because what I did was create a Belizean version of the sonnet. The sonnet already exists. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. But what the need is to find intrinsic ways for us to assert the Belizean identity. Folklore has or is a significant influence in my writing style and the literary techniques that I use, because the way that folklore is constructed and devised in terms of its plot, its scheme, and the layout of a story, for example, is not just to tell a story. There's an underlying message that is being conveyed through the art form of storytelling or through the art form of the narration. So what is important in my writing is to first understand what it is that I want to convey, and then find the artistic way to capture that story or to capture that lesson that is to be conveyed in the poem or in the short story or the play. I borrow a lot from Creole folklore because I'm Creole. It's what I grew up in. As far back as I could remember, in my family, we have been telling stories. Stories that are passed on from generation to generation that would include characters like Anansi, Bra Tiger, Tata Dohende, La Sucia, La Llorona, and there are others that I haven't heard about except within my family. So I think there are characters that were either created by my mom or my dad. For example, Greasy Man and Rubber Boots Man. So the style, there's a lot of drama that is captured in the Creole storytelling. There's a lot of suspense. There's a lot of repetition that helps to drive the point or the moral of the story home. And I try to capture that in the way that I write, because it's a tried and true method. It's a formula that we use even in our everyday lives. And because this is part of my background, in a Creole we say we like to hold long bench. And holding long bench in itself is an art form that is derived from the Creole storytelling form. Nature is cyclical. It's not linear. So every generation experience cycles that generations before them experience. Whether we're looking at our parents' generation, the grandparents' generation, 10 generations removed, we experience very similar things. What is unique to each people in each time is a specific set of conditions that we live in, but we go through the same cycles. So when we listen to George McKesey's story, for example, the one where the mother sends a little boy to the shop, to send to the market to buy hard pipe, liver, and lice. And along the way, first thing, the boy was forgetful. Little George, very forgetful. So by the time he left out the house, he don't remember where he must send a figure and buy. And he first meet a man, the vomit. And part of, especially for me growing up in 80s, 90s, when you must send out a shop, you have to repeat what you are being asked to buy all along the way so you don't forget. Because children are easily distracted. You see things along the way that you like, you meet people along the way that you know, and you forget entirely what they send you to the shop to buy. So along the way, Georgie keep forgetting what he was told and pick up messages from everybody else along the way until he reached the market and see the butcher with one eye and said, one come out, and I hope the next one come out too. And the butcher grabbed the cleaver and say, no make a half cut out your hard pipe, liver, and lights. And then Georgie remember, that's what remember send me for buy. So the moral in that story is being attentive, paying attention, which is important for every child. That's an important lesson for every child, regardless of when that child is living. So the literature, the material, and the stories from generations before us it does act as a foundation for where we are now, because going back to those stories, going back to those writings, we can draw from that experience to learn lessons that are relevant to now. Our African forefathers used the word sankofa, which means looking back in order to move forward. I think the moral lessons and historical narratives are what I capture best, and social commentary as well. And I use the framework of the Belizean storytelling and Belizean narration and keep within the pattern of the Belizean narration to convey this information, to make it authentic and relatable to every Belizean. Well, firstly, DNA records information. So when we're participating in our folklore, it allows us to activate information that is encoded in our DNA that is passed down to us from those who lived before us, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on. And it allows us to have that communal experience because we share similar stories, regardless of culture. For example, look at Belize City. You walk downtown Belize City, it's not only Creole people that you will meet. You'll also meet Mestizo, you meet Maya, you meet East Indian, you meet Garifuna, and you meet recent migrants as well. So the folklore allows us to connect to that Belizean identity. The Belizean folklore could be considered like the mainframe or the server that all of us plug into to share that communal or collective consciousness that is the Belizean identity. It would be hard to pick one George McKesey story because he's an excellent and phenomenal storyteller. The ones that are foremost in my mind are the Kaba story, the Heart, Pipe, Liver, and Light story, and the Chinaman Jan story. From an anthropological perspective, when we're studying civilizations of the past, not only do we look for artifacts from that civilization, but we specifically look for what they wrote down, because that is how they capture their own experience, and it gives first-hand narrative of what that culture or what that society was like. So when we look at what was written before us, yes, it helps us to understand their experience. It helps us to understand their struggles. It helps us to understand areas in which they were able to triumph and ensure the survival of our heritage. The two primary ones that I can think of are Anansi and Tata Dohende. Now, there are numerous Anansi stories. Likewise, there are numerous Tata Dohende stories. Some of them people would share as what was somebody's first-hand experience with Tata Dohende, for example. And it bridges the Maya experience, the Garifuna experience, the Creole experience, because we share the same geographic location. When it comes to Anansi, it bridges the Belizean experience with the Caribbean and the African experience, because the folklore character Anansi actually originated in West Africa. And because the ancestors of Creole people and Creole Garifuna and Caribbean people originate in West Africa, we share similar Anansi stories, and the folklore of Anansi as a folklore character is used to convey important moral lessons in our communities. It's important to understand the usage of Anansi and also Tata Dohende, because these are folklore characters that were created specifically within the cultural context as a teaching tool or a teaching implement. So in your family specifically, there might be Anansi stories that maybe your grandmother created or your parents created to teach you as a child specific lessons that are centered around that character. Folk tales or folklore in any culture is used for that purpose, to convey important lessons that would otherwise take years to convey. When it is captured in a story, it condenses that moral or social lesson in not just a shorter form, but also in an intrinsic way that captures and captivates the audience, that urges them to listen and pay attention, and that allows the lesson to be successfully conveyed to its audience. The folklore allows us to understand how we interface with nature and how we can use elements of the natural environment in harmony or to our advantage. It also encodes the checks and balance that is required for us who use nature in multiple forms, whether we're using plants for food or we're using plants for medicine, whether we're using animals for food. It allows us to understand how to keep the balance with nature. Folk stories carry a certain rhythm. So it must be told at a certain pace in order to have the impact or dramatic effect where necessary. So there are points in a story that require a pause for that effect that is needed. It requires sometimes to slow down the pace or to speed up the pace to convey what technique is being captured or what information needs to be put across without having to explain. For example, if you're talking about someone who was in a hurry, that's an instance where you would speed up the rate at which you're delivering the story so that the audience could understand without you having to explain the hurried state in which the character was moving. That is being conveyed by the speed, your increase in speed in narrating the story becomes effective because you're not just listening to words. You're literally watching a movie, but in your head. So the literary devices and the literary techniques allow you to animate those characters mentally, for you to not only listen to the story, but for you to see the story in your mind's eye. You can either see yourself as a first-hand witness to the story being told, or you could see yourself as one of the characters in the story and follow the story as it goes along, either as the witness or as the character. Well, it adds to it because storytelling in itself is a convergence of all of these art forms. So telling a story requires an understanding of poetic language. It requires an understanding of cultural idioms and proverbs, because in the structure of a proverb, for example, it captures an entire philosophy in a few words. The Belizean sonnet. When we write sonnet, we no ask question like, dost thou comet? When we write one or two lines, we no use word like thus and thine. When we got something to say, we no wait for tomorrow, we say today. We just lay it out there. We highlight hard, make everybody hear. When Belizean write sonnet, we not talk about whence the water runneth. We say rain the pour through the hole in the roof. We no worry how preposterous he's being aloof. We no bother with no lot of semi-demi. But we sonnet still turn out pretty. If you could do what I say, then write one Belizean sonnet compare. All right. So what I use this style to do is to creatively and in a condensed way capture ideas that could then be turned into a classroom lesson, for example. So English teachers and literature teachers could use my work in either their English class or their literature class and decode the structure, decode the meaning of what information I'm conveying. For example, this piece called privateering. Now, the idea of privateering goes back to colonial times when the British would hire ship owners and their crew to either bring goods into the area or to take goods out of this area. Privateering. Many merry men make their way on the seas, sailing and smiling and slapping their knees, dipping and dancing, dozed in fun, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum. When they hear the call aloud, land ahoy! They jump and gibber and jitter with joy. Having sailed months on end under stars and sun, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum. In a leap of faith, setting to make a new escape, they trample grounds, making them shake. After all, a trying distance they had come, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum. Building barracks and quarters for home in the name of England, Portugal, Spain, France, and Rome. For here they stay after the war is won, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum. To the keepers of quiet wisdom, the barefoot wanderers, the griots who plant seeds, even when the world forgets to water them. To the ones who choose simplicity over spectacle, presence over pride, and still listen for the sun when the night is loud. And to every traveler who mistook illusion for truth, may your journey lead you home. My parting shot is for every Belizean to understand that we all contribute to the Belizean identity, because we are Belizeans, and it is important for us to understand how we got to where we are today. It is important for us to know our history. It is important for us to know our cultures, not just your culture, but every culture that contributes to the Belizean identity. It allows us to be more understanding of each other's experience, and it allows us to better harmonize with each other, because we are more alike than we think or that we believe we are different. That's why we are one Belize.